Hello, everyone. Hopefully, you remember me from last week. My name is Jelly, and I'm one of the RCD educators. And for today's lesson, I'm going to take you through a community science project that the RCD actually created. And I'm going to do that using this video. And then at the end of the video, you are going to answer a quick Google form with questions related to the stuff that you learned. So let's get started. Last week, you all learned a little bit about community science. You learned how varied the field of community science can really be, and just how many different projects really exist in the world. You also may have learned, if you had the chance to do the lesson that wasn't live, a little bit about the green spaces in Los Angeles. So today, the community science project that we're going to dive into, that again the RCD created, actually takes place in one of these green spaces. And that space is Trippet Ranch of Topanga State Park. So maybe you remember this space, maybe you don't. It's totally fine either way. But this is actually a park located really close to the office that all of the RCD educators work at. For years, the RCD has been working in this park and in these mountains to restore our native ecosystem. And because the RCD has such a small staff, we can't hope to care for all of the plants that we plant. So we began to host community volunteer events. And during these events, they take place on a Saturday morning. Community members join us. They help us plant, water, and care for all of these plants that we plant. And we actually try to involve our volunteers at every step of the plant's life. So we'll gather the seeds, in this case it's acorns, with our volunteers, and then they'll actually test those acorns using what's called a float test to see if the acorns are healthy. Then we'll go out during an event and we'll plant these acorns in the ground. We'll even build protective cages for these young plants to prevent them from getting grazed. And then, of course, once they start to establish, we have our volunteers come out and water and care for all of these young plants. So in recent years, the RCD has shifted our focus from restoring native ecosystems and chaparral to just replanting oak trees. But why? Why are we doing that? What's happening to our oak woodlands? Well, unfortunately, our oak woodlands have been suffering at a national and even at a global scale. And this is a result, we think, of drought and wildfire, right? Because drought and wildfire are really closely connected in California. These drought and these wildfires are making our oak trees more susceptible to things like disease and beetle invasion. So we have a beetle called the shot-hole borer, and it actually burrows into the tree, which shouldn't be an issue, but this beetle is carrying a fungus that's killing the tree from the inside out. Here's a tree that has evidence of a harmful beetle, because oak trees can still exist with beetles, but once they leave behind a deadly fungus, that's kind of it. There's other diseases like sudden oak death that have also suddenly become fatal to our oak trees. So at the RCD, our primary concern is the health of our local watersheds, because a healthy watershed is indicative of a healthy ecosystem and a healthy community. And without oak trees, our watersheds, our creeks, could not hope to remain healthy. Why? What do trees do? We love trees. Trees provide shade. They actually filter toxins from the air and purify it. They cool the air with their canopy, and they actually also put moisture, water in the air to cool the entire area. They provide habitat for lots of different species, birds, bugs, squirrels, and actually fish through their canopy. They provide oxygen, right? They take in carbon dioxide and let off oxygen that we all breathe, animals included. And they actually can stabilize the soil. They can stabilize the riverbanks and prevent erosion. And they provide nutrients to our soil and to all the critters that live in our soil through leaf litter, those fallen leaves on the ground. And our fish actually eat some of those critters that are in the soil. So trees help fish. So we love trees. Trees help us, they help fish. And of course, trees add beauty to our environment. We just love to look at trees, right? So remember back to the trees that we planted. They're not going to survive without these volunteer events that we run, right? They need water every few weeks. But suddenly in March, our volunteer events, just like the rest of the world, shut down. And in January of 2020, just 2 months before the pandemic hit, we'd planted 200 additional oak trees at Trippet Ranch. And our staff alone could not hope to water all these newly planted trees and keep them alive. And remember, the first few months for these young trees are the most important. We weren't sure what to do, but then it hit us. Our local community members hike in this park all the time, especially in the summer. So why not call on some of these hikers to see if they might be able to water a tree or two while they hiked? So we reached out to our community through email, flyers, and through signs and banners that we actually posted at the park. So that's these big banners shown here. And we even put some signs on trees that were along the trails, the hiking trails in Trippet. And it turns out that our community members were super excited to get involved. So over on the right-hand side here is a map of all of the trees that were available to be adopted. We wanted our community members to maybe adopt a tree. And just a few weeks later, look what happened. So the white dots represent trees that needed to be adopted, and the red dots represent trees that were getting adopted. So all of a sudden, we started to see that our Adopt a Tree program was successful. It was beginning to be successful. And just a few weeks later, we found out that almost half of our trees had been adopted. So nearly 100 trees. And so these trees continued to receive water throughout those spring and summer months, despite the cancellation of our volunteer events. And every time a community member cares for a tree, they fill out what's called a tree report card, where they can tell us how the tree is doing, how much water they gave it, and when. They can upload a picture of the tree to show the tree's health, and they can even give their tree a name. And all this data, since it's kept in this form, is automatically updated in a running spreadsheet, which our staff will check periodically. And we make sure that our website is updated weekly because this is where all our volunteers will go to figure out which trees still need adopting and which have been adopted. So community members really took to this project and helped our trees survive. And some even uploaded their trees to social media. So this is really incredible. We actually recruited some volunteers that we'd never even met. We assumed that most of the volunteers that'd be interested in this program would be kind of our local community, volunteers that had already known us for years. But we ended up meeting some new people and finding some new friends. So this was incredible. And this person in the middle, actually, of this slide, that volunteer named her trees after her grandparents who had passed away. So it was really beautiful to see these community members come together. Now we've begun hosting small volunteer events while following CDC guidelines regarding social distancing and gathering to keep us all safe. And during these events, volunteers water a tree, they note the tag on that tree, and then they find one of our stream team members who are at the event, what tree they watered and how it's doing. So our stream team members keep track of all this data on a map and a clipboard, which then gets uploaded to our database once we get back to the office. And this way we can check and monitor the health of all of our previously planted trees throughout the years. And since this pandemic, we found that our trees are not just surviving, but they're actually thriving thanks to this dedicated team of community volunteers. So even when the pandemic ends, our volunteer events come back in full swing. we can always rely on this community science project and our dedicated community members to ensure the continued survival of our oak trees and of our native oak woodlands. And actually next year, we're going to be promoting this event again because these hot summer months kind of proved to be the toughest for the trees. So we're really excited that this program can continue and that it was such a success this year. So that kind of concludes the video portion of the event or of this assignment. So now that you've heard all about how the RCD developed and managed a community science project, to review what we discussed here, I have a few questions for you in this Google form. So hopefully you can follow this Google form link and answer some of those questions to the best of your ability. And as you think about those questions, they may be questions that you ask yourself when you try to design a community science project of your very own. So have fun and thank you for joining me during this assignment. Bye.